We're here at Shoreditch House for Future Fashion, and my name's Amisha Ghadiali. I'm joined today by Lyla Patel, who is Head of Education at the charity TRAID.
Hello.
Hey. So, what does TRAID stand for?
TRAID actually stands for Textile Recycling for Aid and International Development. We're a charity, we're 11 years old, and we work to rescue the UK's unwanted clothes and recognise their value and to create more value out of that clothing.
So there's something like 2 million tonnes of clothing that's discarded in the UK alone every year.
Yeah.
And where does most of that go?
So most of that clothing goes in people's bins, and if it goes in people's bins, it's ending up in landfills around our country, which are filling up. So it's also ending up being incinerated. That's burnt into nothing. Mm-hmm. And our clothes are really precious resources. Cotton is an incredibly thirsty crop to grow. It uses more chemicals than any other crop, and it's grown all over the world. So to take that very precious plant and put loads of effort and energy into working it, making it into yarn and fabric and sewing it, mm-hmm. and then to have it binned a few years later or even a few months later and buried or burned is just a complete waste of so many people's time and effort and so much of our precious limited resource. And that's just cotton. It's the same with our oil that's being processed into polyester and our linen and viscose and everything else.
So why do you think we throw clothes in the bin? That seems like a really alien thing for me to do.
I ask people all the time.
Yeah.
My role as head of education means I'm going out and talking to people and asking them what they're doing with their clothing. And people always say to me, I give all my clothing to charity. And that's really fantastic. And I know a lot of people do give their clothing to charity. But a lot of people put their clothing in the bin. And something about, I think, the psychology of a bin, that once people have put something in it, it totally doesn't exist.
Yeah.
They don't think about where it's going, it's gone.
Yeah.
And people are putting so much clothing in the bin that they're not even recognising. It stops having a value at that point, so they completely forget about it. People are doing it all the time.
So if if I wanted to give my clothing to charity, so I could basically take it down to a charity shop, or there's loads on my street. There's loads of different textile recycling bins.
Yes.
What's the difference of how do I pick which one?
So TRAID, we have 1,400 of mm-hmm. those textile banks that you're seeing, and we have 10 shops as well. So for us, we'd like people to either donate to our shop or our bank, and for us it doesn't really make a lot of difference, because what we do with our textile banks is that we collect from our textile banks every week, and we bring that clothing to a central warehouse in Wembley where we hand sort all of that clothing mm-hmm. to find out every piece of clothing that we're donated, what's the best possible use for it. Actually, what we're saying is, how can we make the most money out of every piece of clothing that we're being given? Yeah. Is that best sold in a shop in the UK? Will someone buy it? Which is the same as if somebody gives it over the door to their local charity shop. It will get sold in the UK, and that means that somebody in the UK has taken something that's waste rather than bought something that's new. So it reduces our UK consumption, and that's fantastic. And if we don't think we can sell it in the UK, if it's damaged or torn, or maybe just not fashionable enough, or maybe it's something that we just have an abundance of in the UK and so we can't sell, then we have to look for another stream for it. And what we do at TRAID is then we wholesale that material onto somebody based in Northern Ireland who'll sort that into 250 categories to then send that particular type of clothes to the right place in the world. Now, we're one of the only banks in the UK that do that. If you're donating your clothing to other textile banks, mm-hmm. Maybe I won't name names, but any other textile bank, that's what's happening to it straight away. It's getting sorted and sent to other countries. Now that is fantastic because that clothing is being recycled and it's being used. Some of the clothing isn't good enough to even sell in other countries, and that means it's ragged, it's turned into car seat stuffing, it's turned into cleaning cloths, and that is all good for recycling, and those resources are all being saved. But what you're not doing when you're donating to any of those banks is reducing consumption in the UK, because that clothing isn't staying in the UK. And part of the problem of that is that we have clothing in ships, sailing all around the world. And not everywhere in the world wants our second-hand clothing. You know, second-hand clothing makes up 50% of Senegal's imports. A lot of the countries in West Africa are importing huge amounts of that clothing, and it's not always very good clothing. We work with a wholesaler that sorts into 250 categories, and he does his best, and he's the only one with all of his environmental legislation, which means people are on those ships checking he's marked it out correctly, which means when someone buys it in another country, they know pretty much exactly what they're buying and the quality that they're buying. But most other organisations don't do that. They don't sort into as many categories. That means that when people are buying it on the other end, they're getting a huge mix. They don't know the quality of what they're buying, and so they don't know the value of it.
And so then you hear stories about women that are saving up to buy bundles of clothing, and then they have to sell them to their local market, but they have no idea what quality it's going to be.
Exactly.
And obviously that's affected by the fact that we're buying lesser quality clothes and discarding them quicker. So the kind of that's getting
more and more. So even at TRAID, we're seeing more and more of the clothing that we're collecting being of lower quality, which means it's more difficult for us to sell it. Mm-hmm. And so that's not just affecting us in this country, that we're consuming more and more new clothes, but also that consumption of more and more new clothes means more and more clothing waste, and that clothing waste is going up every year. And it's a neat solution at the moment that we get to sell all our clothing all around the world, but that's kind of, it's not a complete solution because it's still ending up as waste in other countries.
And then what does TRAID, so obviously the recycling is a big part of your work, but then there are other parts of your work which is education and then also projects around the world.
Yes, so our recycling operation is the lifeblood of our organisation, but that blood is powering a huge trade body of exciting things going on. So our shops are really exciting. Our shops are exciting because they're places people can come and buy ethically, affordably, because it's second-hand clothing. And we make a really big effort to make sure our shops look fantastic, and they're places where people want to be. And all of our shop managers love their clothes, and so we're keen to talk about them and put effort into making them look good. And in that shop as well, we also, 4 of our shops sell our own recycled fashion label. So it's some of that clothing actually that was being sent to other countries. And we don't want that at TRAID. We want all of the clothing to be able to stay in the UK. We want people to be buying wonderful clothes that can be worn again and again and again by lots of different people. But that's not the case. And we want to try to keep as much as we can in the UK. So we take some of that clothing, or sometimes we get fabric donations as well. We've been really lucky to get fabric donations from great fabric suppliers around the world, and they have offcuts that they're not using, or 1 or 2 rolls, which means nothing to them. They can't do anything with it, but for us it's 10 dresses that we can make, and that's called TRAID Remade. And I'll get you some to look at, but there's some around which you can see, and it's just garments that we've taken and found how we can adjust them so that people can be wearing them again.
So upcycling, basically turning these different things into something that's really desirable, that's kind of something that everyone will want to buy when they're in the shop.
Exactly, and we make more money out of that than we can from the pieces as they were, so it's added value. And then with all that, we're really lucky. We make a profit from all of our shops, from our wholesale and from our remade label, and then we use that profit to try to change our current fashion industry. We totally recognise that most people don't buy all of their clothes from TRAID. Yeah. We don't have enough shops for them to do that yet. But they are buying new clothes, and what we want to try and do is, if we are going to be buying new clothes, let's look at all the problems in the fashion industry and let's try and make it better, because at TRAID we really believe we can change it. Yeah. And I believe that because I've seen now 10 years of international development projects changing our world from people buying stuff in the UK. And in the last 3 or 4 years, I've seen the projects that we've been funding in the fashion industry, with the fashion industry, and seen the possibility for us to have beautiful, quality, ethical clothing, and charities working towards that.
Tell us about 1 or 2 of the projects.
So, at the very beginning with cotton, which I've already mentioned, we've got a project in Benin in West Africa. Most of the cotton that we buy across the world is just conventional cotton. As I said, it uses loads of pesticide. In Benin, we've been funding a project for 5 years, working with farmers, helping them move from conventional cotton growth to organic cotton growth. And they're doing that Not because they care about the environment, although they do care about their local environment, and not because they're worried about our health and us wearing pesticide cotton, but they're doing it for their own health, the farmers' health, and their income. It's a route for them out of poverty. Pesticides to them mean spending huge bills at the beginning of the season to buy the pesticide, then having huge bills all the way through the season because they need medical help, because they've got rashes and burns and scars and, you know, might be endangering their families, their children might be exposed to these pesticides, and then at the end of the season selling it on a worldwide market where the cotton price is going up and down, and even though it's going up in the last 2 years, it's still not very much for the farmers. They're moving to organic with us, where we're helping them train to get all the things that they need to support them in the first few years, and then they don't have to buy the pesticides, so they get more money at the beginning of the season. They don't have to spend their money on medical help, so they have more money in their pockets through the season, and then they get to sell it as an organic cotton crop and get more money. And so it's winning all the way along the chain for them. And so I'm really proud of that project. It's really exciting. And what's the exciting stories coming out of the farmers as well, like they're on their farms, they now don't just grow cotton, they grow cashew nuts and cowpeas, which they can eat and sell. And they can't, because the land's fertile and clean.
We were talking earlier, and you were saying something really interesting about kind of how having a framework when you're shopping, because the reason that we have so much textile in our life is because of our shopping habits.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just thought it was quite interesting what you were saying about needing to stay rational in the shops.
Yes. So one of the things people always say is, well, how can I shop ethically on the high street? And it's too complicated to answer that question, because there are some ethical things happening on the high street, but that whole model is unethical.
Yeah.
And we're consuming, as you said, so much now, and we consume 4 times the amount than we did just 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Part of that drive for consumption and buying is led by our entire society telling us we should be constantly buying. And that system of making us constantly buy has got more and more skilled at making us do that. One of the things that I found is it's really difficult to fight that. I find it really hard. I want to buy something new for my cousin's hen do next weekend. I want to wear something special and make her feel like I've made an effort. And there's loads of ways of them making me feel that. Mm-hmm. And what I find it's really important to do is to try to cut that emotion down, or to remember how you can get that emotion in a positive way, and to be more rational about the things that I buy, and all the things that I buy, not just clothing. And what I think is really useful, because it's so hard to cut yourself off from your own emotions, is it's easier if you have something like a fail-safe to go back to. So it's like, oh, I want to buy this because it's great and exciting and I can afford it. Great, I'll buy it. And then to stop yourself, it's easier for, hold on, I've got some rules. Does this fit into my rules? Mm-hmm. And that's where my rules are now your 12 rules. So I go to I don't have to now, but I would go to the front of my diary. I have it stuck in the front of my diary. And, does this match my values? Yeah. Because those 12 rules are totally my values. It's what I want for our world. So, is this buying choice matching my values? I can do yes or no. And I can have a look. No, it doesn't fit into any of these categories. It would be a rule breaker. And then I would turn over, and if I did buy it, I would go to the list, I would have to write it down, I'd have to tick the red box, which I don't want to do. That's then a negative. So then buying that stops being a positive emotion. Mm-hmm. It becomes a negative thing to do. Yeah. And actually, if I found it, and that thing that I really wanted to buy and could afford happened to be organic and fair trade and made by somebody I knew and with the picture and the story, and I thought, actually, this is going to make the world better. I get to tick the positive box. It's a triply positive thing where I know I'm making the world better, not worse.
And you get the positive emotion from the ticking.
I get the ticking.
Amazing. Lyla, thank you so much.
You're very
Let's
welcome.
get to the sewing machines.
Yes.